Thank you. Firstly, thanks Ken and Lisa for inviting me up to speak, and also Anne for the facilities. I think you guys have a wonderful resources here. It's amazing. So I've got a fairly snappy presentation. We've got about 10 minutes. We're not going to be able to cover everything you might need to know about Screenrights in 10 minutes. So the purpose of today is to really create an awareness so you know what we do and can come to us with any questions that you do have, and to, I guess, impart a particularly important message, which I'm going to do using some of our members' images. So forgive me in advance if I take the context of an original image and twist it for my own purposes of telling a bit of a story about what's important about Screenrights royalties. All right, okay, so like Ken said, we're a collecting society. So what that means is that we do collect and pay royalties, and we do so based on provisions in the Copyright Act, and the government has appointed us to do that. But they're very specific provisions in the Copyright Act, and it's in cases where it's difficult or impossible to do direct licensing on an individual basis. So we're set up, and our aim is to support diversity and growth in the industry, and we do that through royalty payments. And I picked a lovely image here of Madeleine that she supplied to us a couple of years ago with a great quote that she also provided us with about the importance of the sustainability of royalties to the industry. And when you're talking about the ebbs and flows of jumping between projects, and a Screenrights royalty payment can come through unexpectedly at just the right moment and pay bills and sustain businesses in times where you're going through development. So we pay, if I can get it to work, $35 million in royalties a year. And those royalties come from educational, government and retransmission. And so when I speak to people about the different types of royalties, it's the type of look that I kind of get, because it's all based on the Copyright Act, and it's all royalties are generated from exercises of copyright. So for example, Screenrights licenses educational institutions all over Australia for the right to copy whatever they like from the TV. So when they make a copy, that's an exercise of copyright, and there are royalties payable. So in the old days it used to be done by VHS, now it's generally a content management system. And so when they make a copy, there's exercise of copyright. When they communicate that copy by putting it on an intranet, making it available for students, that's a communication, and that's an exercise of copyright. So there's a royalty. And then when they perform that program in the classroom, that's an exercise of copyright, but there's an exception under the Act, and there's no royalty. So the royalties that we pay for education are for when people copy and when they communicate. And so when we get further on in the presentation, we're going to talk about rights. Those are the types of rights that you need to hold in order to be able to claim royalties. So education is the main source of income, particularly for documentaries. The government can also copy whatever they like from the TV for use for government purposes, and there are royalties associated with that. But most of those royalties go to news and current affairs, radio, and there's not a lot for documentary and drama from that sector. And retransmission, which is where Foxtel or a similar company picks up an entire signal for ABC or SBS and retransmits that entire signal on their platform. Now, they might have done a deal in order to get the signal in the first place, but they didn't approach every producer or rights holder or other rights holders in a program to get permission to retransmit your program first. So they pay us a license, and we distribute royalties to those people who own those programs. So that is retransmission. So we pay royalties to rights holders, and rights are transferable, and they can be passed in contracts. It's not as snappy as it needs to be, I'm not sure. So when you're doing your contracts, you need to be clear on the rights that you hold. And so when you are negotiating your agreement, perhaps with you're a writer, you're negotiating with a producer, or you're a director negotiating with a producer, or you're a producer on the other side, or you're a producer negotiating with your distributor or your broadcaster, those rights to collect the royalties that we distribute are all considered in those contracts, or should be considered in those contracts, and can transfer. And they have economic value. So there is an interest to you in retaining those rights, but there's also an interest to the other party in acquiring those rights. And it's just important to have the understanding of the fact that there is economic value and what that might be, and whether or not you're prepared to assign that right away in exchange for getting your program up and made, or whether or not that's something you want to hold on to. And it's an ongoing decision for even experienced producers. So it does mean you do need to be savvy, so that you don't accidentally assign away your right to collect the royalties without realising it. The more you understand about the potential economic or commercial value of those rights that can move by contract, the better that you are to position yourself in terms of being able to acquire those, to be able to collect the royalties. But don't despair. We always say seek legal advice, but we also publish standard contract clauses that you can access from our website that will give you a framework from which you can make sure that you're addressing these types of things in your contracts. To collect royalties, you do need to become a member of Screenrights, and you need to tell us about the programs where you can actually collect those royalties. So we ask you to register your programs with us and register your claim to royalties. And you can register any program that's on TV. It doesn't matter what genre. A lot of the money that we distribute does go to documentary. There's still quite a lot of money that goes to drama and other forms of media that are on the TV, but it's anything on the TV at all. So register everything. We are here to help. So if you've got questions, come talk to me. I'm here at the conference, but we're very readily available to talk to anyone about their programs and what you need to do in order to make sure that you're covering off Screenrights royalties in your contracts. In addition to what we distribute in terms of royalties, we also offer a couple of services that are beyond royalty collection. The first is our disbursement service. So at the point where you might be talking to Sharon Menzies from Fulcrum about the financing of your project, you might also want to be talking to us. We offer a service where we can collect on behalf of your investors and yourself all income that comes through for your project and disperse it all to your investors in accordance with your recoupment schedule and your finance plan. And that can mean that you can get on with making your next projects, and there's less administration going forward, but it also can mean that there's a trusted third party to all of the investors involved in the project who's handling the money as it comes through, and it can help with relationships down the track. Our other service is our international collection service. So Screenrights is not isolated in terms of what we do. We work with a network of societies around the world that have similar royalty provisions in their Copyright Acts. They're all different. They're all based on different laws, different territories. There could be different rights involved. And it's quite complicated to know exactly who these organisations are across the world, and introduce yourself to them, make sure you've got all your registrations in order to be able to collect royalties from around the world. So we do that on behalf of our members if they wanted us to do that for them. And I think we've covered everything. I think I hopefully kept that to 10 minutes. Yeah, membership is absolutely free. We're non-profit, so we just deduct our costs from the royalties that come through. Retrospective, we have our distribution pools open for a period of 6 years. So if you had a program that was on the TV 5 or 6 years ago, it's possible that there's still an opportunity to claim royalties. But we also if you haven't registered with us, we'll also do our own research to try and identify you and have tracked you down. So there's a little bit of that as well.